Good morning. It is Thursday. It's the 10th of April. Our Lenten reading is John 15:18 to 27, and I'm reading verses 18 and 19. If the world hates you, be aware that it hated me first. If you belonged to the world would love you as its own. However, because you do not belong to the world, but I chose you out of the world, for this reason the world hates you. This really continues the thought I ended on yesterday, and that is when we are being the disciples that God calls us to be, when we are really living in the world but not being of the world, then we make the world extremely uncomfortable at best and hating us at worst because it hated Christ first. And I don't know about you, but I've seen this in my own life when I lost a friend because they assumed I would disapprove of what they're doing, and instead of even asking me or talking to me about it or giving me a chance to even understand why they were making their choices, they just made that assumption and discontinued any interaction with me. The world doesn't appreciate true righteousness. It creates all sorts of false righteousness. We are to love one another, meaning from the world's standpoint, we are to accept whatever somebody does, even if it's destructive to them, destructive to us, directly contrary to God's will. But we are supposed to be loving. And we are supposed to be loving. I talked about this last Sunday in my class, and that is for parents. Being a loving parent sometimes means allowing the child to receive the consequences of their actions and not protecting them, because that way maybe they'll learn something they need to learn. We're told in Hebrews that God disciplines us because he loves us. So to be loving to somebody who's in sin and acting in a way that's actually destructive, which of course they think is wonderful, if we really love them in a loving and humble way, we will tell them that what they're doing is wrong, not just because it's sin, which is enough reason, but because it actually is destructive to them, and if they're believers, to their witness. If they're non-believers, then they need to acknowledge what they're doing is wrong and turn to Christ for forgiveness. So if we stand for truth, we're living in a world that seems to hate truth, and so it's not going to be appreciated, and that's got to be all right. Not comfortable, we don't like the results, but excuse me, but it needs to be all right in the sense that God said it, I believe it, and I'm going to obey it. And so when we're talking about discipleship, we're talking about something that's a bit more difficult in this world. But nevertheless, that's the kind of walk that will eventually get us a well done, and how we are working on our 501ks, that is, where our treasures are, that's where our heart is, so they better be in heaven. And so comfort one another when we sometimes struggle because of the world's reactions. But as the scripture says, don't become weary in doing good, meaning don't let the world's reactions overwhelm you to the point where you give up being who God has called you to be. So ask for the strength of the Spirit, for the opportunities, and there's nothing wrong with asking for some encouragement so that you know that you are walking in the ways God would have you walk. And so I hope you feel encouraged, and I'll see you again tomorrow.